Precious Evans says she lost both of her parents at the same time. Her mother, Crystal Evans, go through an ugly divorce with her father for a year.
She was so happy after her divorce. She felt free.
Precious says her mother was at the Spalding County Courthouse for a hearing connected to their separation Friday afternoon.
The judge did issue a warrant. Instead of the judge taking him in right then and there, the judge said that he could turn himself in Monday night.
In a lengthy Facebook post, Sheriff Daryl Dix says Crystal walked out of the courthouse to her car where Mallory met her, shooting her multiple times from the window. Mallory did not stop for police and eventually shot himself. He's alive, but Evans is not, which Precious believes could have been prevented.
She did everything right. She exposed the truth, left a trail of warnings, and begged for help. For years, she documented her fear, calling out the man she once trusted most, pleading with the system to take her seriously. Yet still she was ignored. And then, in broad daylight, just steps away from the courthouse where she had asked to be protected, the nightmare she always feared finally came true. She was hunted down by her ex-husband, in a place where justice should have been her shield. How could this happen? How could a woman who followed every rule, who left a paper trail of cries for help, still end up alone, defenseless, and murdered in the street? And why did no one stop it? Welcome to City Crime Tales. Here we don't just cover true crime stories, we uncover the broken systems, the ignored warnings, and the lives behind the headlines. If you want stories that challenge you to look deeper, to ask hard questions, and to honor victims by truly remembering their fight, subscribe now and join our community. Because tonight's case is one you'll never forget. This is the story of Crystal Evans, a mother, a businesswoman, and a fighter. A woman who stood up for herself, who tried to carve out a new life, who begged to be heard, only to be silenced by the very man she was escaping. And tonight, we take you step by step through her journey from love to betrayal, from warning to tragedy, from hope to heartbreak. Could you imagine walking out of a courtroom where you had just begged for protection, only to find your killer waiting for you outside? What would you have done differently, and could this tragedy have been stopped? Before the headlines, before the tragedy, Crystal Evans was just Crystal. A young woman with dreams far bigger than the small town she grew up in. Griffin, Georgia. A place where everyone knew your name, but sometimes they didn't know your heart. It was a quiet town, tucked away from the rush of city life, but for Crystal, it was never quite enough. Her life here was warm, full of family dinners, long summers, and the comforting routine of small-town living. But Crystal knew there was more out there. She wasn't going to be confined by the familiar faces and small-town streets. She was meant for something bigger. Crystal was the kind of person who could walk into a room and instantly change the atmosphere. It wasn't just about how she looked or what she wore. It was her energy. People couldn't help but notice her, not because she tried to stand out, but because she had that kind of magnetic personality. She had an openness about her that made others feel safe. She was the friend who was always there, whether you needed a shoulder to cry on or someone to laugh with. Her heart was wide open, and it made everyone around her feel seen, heard, and understood. Born into a family with strong roots in Griffin, Crystal's early life was steeped in love, but also in the weight of small-town expectations. Her parents, hardworking and dedicated, laid down a foundation of love, but also of duty. It wasn't always an easy life. Small towns, as beautiful as they are, often come with their own set of challenges. gossip, assumptions, and a rigid view of what success should look like. For Crystal, it was clear early on that she wanted more than that. She wasn't content with the predictable. She had ambitions that far exceeded what many in Griffin thought possible. As a child, Crystal's imagination was her escape. She dreamed of traveling beyond the quiet streets of Griffin, exploring the world and building something of her own. She wasn't the kind of girl who would be content sitting on the sidelines. She wanted to build a life that reflected her dreams and her fierce determination. And she wasn't going to wait around for life to hand it to her. Crystal wasn't just a dreamer, she was a doer. The fire to succeed was always in her. She found joy in creating, in making something from nothing. A skill she would later bring into her adult life when she decided to start her own business. But even in those early years, Crystal knew that to build her dreams, she would need people by her side. People she could trust. People who could walk that path with her. That's where Tom Mallory came into the picture. Someone she had known almost as long as she could remember. A man she trusted, someone who seemed like a natural fit to be part of her future. Tom and Crystal had known each other since childhood, their lives intertwined in ways that made it feel impossible to imagine a future without him. They grew up in the same town, went to the same schools, and shared the same memories. He wasn't a stranger, he was a part of her history. For Crystal, that meant trust. The kind of trust you have when you've known someone your whole life. And that trust would become her biggest vulnerability. But Crystal wasn't the type to rush into things. She didn't fall in love easily, and she didn't hand out trust to just anyone. She had worked hard for everything she had. Her dreams, her ambition, her place in the world, and she wasn't going to let anyone take that away from her. But Tom? He made her believe he was different. They had history, they had shared memories, and those early years together felt like they were meant to be. In their early 20s, after years of friendship, Crystal and Tom decided to get married. Seemed like a natural step. They had built a life together after all. They were partners in every sense of the word, from business to family to dreams of the future. The idea of building something together, of creating a life that was theirs, felt like the next chapter in a long story. But little did Crystal know, the foundation they were laying would soon crumble under the weight of deception. They say you can't truly know someone until you've lived with them, worked with them, and faced challenges together. For Crystal, that challenge was the very person she thought she knew better than anyone. Tom Mallory. The man she'd trusted with her heart, and her future was about to show her a side of him she never could have imagined. And that revelation would change everything. Isn't it strange how the people we grow up with can become either our safest refuge or our greatest threat? What happens when someone you trust, someone you've known your entire life, turns into a stranger overnight? Could Crystal have seen the signs? When Crystal and Tom married, it seemed like a fairy tale. Childhood friends, now partners for life, embarking on a journey together. They said their vows, promising to be each other's rock, to face whatever life would throw at them as one. For Crystal, the decision felt right. This was the man she had known her whole life. The man who had shared in her dreams, her successes, her laughter. They were going to build a life together, raise children, and create a legacy. and for a while it seemed like they were doing just that. Together they launched a contracting company. Crystal poured her heart and soul into it, working long hours, managing clients, and handling everything that came with running a business. Tom's name might have been on the paperwork, but anyone who knew the company knew the truth. Crystal was the one who ran the show. She had a knack for getting things done, making things happen. She was organized, creative, tough, but graceful. She balanced being a mother, a businesswoman, and a wife with the kind of grace that left others in awe. At home they lived what looked like the perfect life. Dinner every night as a family, vacations, birthday parties, and holidays filled with laughter. Crystal was the glue that held it all together. She made it look effortless. Their daughter, Precious, was growing up in a house filled with love, and every corner of their life seemed to shine. People admired the life Crystal and Tom had built: a successful business, a growing family, a beautiful home. But while everything appeared perfect on the surface, cracks were starting to show beneath the carefully curated images. The long hours Crystal spent building their future also left little time for the kind of intimacy and connection that marriage requires. Tom's attention began to wander. At first it was small things, the occasional late night, the unexplained absences, the vague excuses. But Crystal was no fool. She noticed the change. She noticed when the texts started coming more frequently. And she noticed when Tom became more distant, even in the moments when they were supposed to be together. Crystal tried to hold it all together. She tried to make excuses, to look the other way, to focus on the business, the family, and everything else that seemed to be going well. But she couldn't ignore the feeling deep inside, the gut-wrenching suspicion that something was wrong. At first she didn't want to believe it. But as the days went on, as the signs grew clearer, Crystal couldn't deny it any longer. Her marriage, her partnership, was starting to unravel. And then came the discovery that would change everything. Crystal found out that Tom wasn't just distant. He was having an affair. At first, she confronted him calmly, trying to make sense of it. But as the truth came out, it became clear that Tom wasn't just cheating once. There was a pattern, a secret life that Crystal never could have imagined. The man she had known since childhood, the man she trusted more than anyone, had been lying to her, betraying her, and using their business, their money, to fuel a life she had never known about. The cracks that had been forming in Crystal's marriage turned into shattered glass the day she uncovered the truth. Tom wasn't just cheating on her. He was living a double life, and the extent of his deception was far worse than she could have ever imagined. What Crystal thought was a brief affair, something they could maybe work through, turned out to be something far more sinister. Tom wasn't just stepping out with women. He was hiding a side of himself Crystal had never seen. Multiple men. Affairs that went beyond fleeting moments of infidelity. The truth was ugly, so ugly that Crystal could hardly believe it at first. Her husband, the man she had built a life with, had been living a secret life. A life fueled by lies, manipulation, and betrayal. And worse, he had been using the very business Crystal worked so hard to build to fund this hidden world. When Crystal discovered the depth of Tom's double life, her world came crashing down. But Crystal wasn't the type to sit quietly and suffer. She was a fighter, always had been. She knew that silence would never erase the pain, and it would never take away the humiliation she felt. So, instead of hiding the truth, Crystal did something that would change everything. She went public. She exposed Tom for what he truly was. It wasn't just about betrayal. It was about everything: the lies, the manipulation, the money. The life she had worked so hard to build was nothing more than a facade. So she took to social media, to Facebook, and shared the truth with the world. She posted screenshots of text messages, recordings of conversations, and long, emotional posts that peeled back the curtain on Tom's secrets. For Crystal, this was more than just a heartbreak. This was a fight for her dignity, a fight for justice, a fight for the truth to come out. Here was Tom, not just living a lie, but actively manipulating her, using the business they had built together to fund his affairs. The amount of deceit that flowed through Tom's life, his actions, his lies, his betrayal, was beyond anything Crystal could have imagined. And yet it was all out in the open now. He couldn't hide anymore. And the pain? The humiliation was deep. Crystal wasn't just heartbroken, she was embarrassed, angry, and devastated. Tom had made her look like a fool in front of everyone, all while using the money they earned together to sustain his secret life. But even as the truth poured out in public, Crystal wasn't sure if exposing Tom was going to bring her relief or make things worse. By exposing Tom's double life, Crystal not only risked her marriage but her reputation, her family's privacy, and her business. This wasn't just about a personal betrayal. It was about exposing the manipulation that had been going on behind closed doors. And in doing so, she hoped she could reclaim some part of herself, some part of the dignity that Tom had stolen. Crystal's posts weren't just about airing her personal pain. They were a warning, a message to other women who might find themselves in the same position. And a message to Tom, the man who had destroyed everything: I will not let you get away with this. Would you have stayed quiet, or would you have done what Crystal did and exposed the truth? Would you have fought for your dignity in the same way, even if you knew it could destroy everything? After Crystal exposed Tom's double life, something inside him snapped. The man she had once trusted, the man she had loved for years, was no longer the person she thought she knew. No longer just a cheating husband. Now he was a predator. He was watching her every move, following her, showing up at her home, lurking in the shadows of her life. He turned from a man she was trying to escape into a constant, terrifying presence. At first it started small. He would show up at her house unannounced, just sitting in his car across the street, waiting for her to leave. Then it escalated. He started showing up at night, at all hours, tapping on the windows, leaving strange messages on her door, and sending texts that made Crystal feel like there was no place left to hide. Friends say he became her shadow. No matter where she went, no matter what she did, Tom was there, watching her every move. And the fear? It was real. Crystal didn't try to hide it. She made it clear that she was scared. Crystal didn't keep her fear to herself. She went public again. She posted about Tom's behavior, how he was stalking her, how he was showing up uninvited, how she couldn't escape him. She didn't want to be a prisoner in her own life. She warned everyone, Tom Mallory was dangerous. And even though she filed for protective orders, even though she documented every threat, every strange encounter, the system failed her. Tom remained free. The law couldn't, or wouldn't, stop him. And Crystal knew it. He knew it too. Crystal wasn't the only one who noticed the danger. Her friends, her family, they saw it too. They saw how Tom's behavior shifted from simply being a cheater to something far more sinister. He wasn't just threatening her, he was trying to break her. They could see the fear in her eyes every time she went to her car or checked the locks on her door. But Crystal kept trying. She filed court papers. Protective orders were filed, but each time the system let her down. She tried to live her life, but every corner she turned, Tom was there. His presence lingering in every shadow, his voice echoing in every phone call. The emotional toll was just as heavy as the physical one. Crystal's home, once a place of comfort and peace, now felt like a trap. She couldn't escape the suffocating fear that she would never be safe. And still, Tom circled her life like a predator, waiting for his moment, planning his next move. The law may have handed her a piece of paper, but it couldn't stop the stalking. It couldn't stop Tom. Crystal kept her warnings online. She begged people to understand the danger she was in. The stalking grew worse, but her cries for help fell on deaf ears. No one seemed to take her seriously. The courts? They delayed. The sheriff's department? They were understaffed and overworked, and Crystal's calls for help became just another file to sit on a desk. And Tom? He was free. Free to terrorize her. Free to follow her, to intimidate her, to make her life a living nightmare. How many warnings does it take? How many calls to the police? How many protective orders does it take before someone steps in? Crystal was living in constant fear, unable to go about her life. And as time went on, she knew in her gut that it wasn't a matter of if, but when Tom would make his final move. And still the system failed her. How many warnings does it take before a system steps in? When someone is stalking you, when you're living in fear, should the law be enough to protect you? Or does the system always fail when it matters most? September 2023. Just 2 days earlier, Crystal had finally been granted a permanent restraining order. After months of documenting threats, stalking, and fear, the legal system had finally acknowledged the danger she was in. But there's one truth that Crystal learned the hard way: pieces of paper don't stop bullets. The paper that was supposed to protect her? It didn't change what would happen next. That morning, Crystal attended a court hearing with her daughter, Precious, and a friend by her side. They were hopeful. Hopeful that today things would be different. Hopeful that finally Crystal could be safe, that the law would step in and enforce the protection it had promised her. But as the hearing came to an end, Crystal, who had just begged for safety in front of the judge, was left alone. No one from the courthouse offered to walk her out. No deputy, no officer, no security. Her friend asked, pleaded, for an escort to her car, but nothing was done. Crystal walked out of that courthouse alone. Alone with no protection. She walked into the daylight, hoping that with a restraining order, her worst fears were behind her. But there, just steps away from the courthouse steps, her worst fear was waiting for her. Tom Mallory was waiting. The man who had tortured her for months with his stalking and manipulation. The man who had vowed to make her life miserable. The man who had already shown her that there was no line he wouldn't cross. As Crystal reached her car, Tom pulled out a gun. Without warning, he opened fire. 5 shots in broad daylight, each one louder than the last, each one tearing through her body. She collapsed in the street, right there, in the shadow of the courthouse where she had begged for her life. And in that moment, the woman who had tried so hard to protect herself, to protect her daughter, was gone. Tom didn't stay to face the consequences. He didn't stick around to see what he had done. He fled the scene, a coward running from the destruction he caused. But he didn't escape for long. Hours later, as the police began their search, Tom Mallory turned the gun on himself. In a final act of cowardice, he took his own life, unable to face the consequences of the murder he had just committed. Crystal Evans died that day, right there, just yards from the courthouse, just steps away from the judge who had granted her protection. She died in the place where she had begged for safety, with the very system that was supposed to protect her failing her in the most catastrophic way. And her daughter, Precious, was left to face a world without her mother, a world where what's the point of asking for protection if it never comes? How could a system that promised safety let a woman die just steps away from a courthouse after she begged for help? Crystal Evans was 48 years old. A mother, a businesswoman, a fighter. She wasn't just someone who lived her life quietly. She worked hard, she fought for what she believed in, and she didn't back down when it came to protecting herself and her family. She did everything that society tells women to do. Document the abuse, report the threats, speak out. But even when she followed the rules, even when she took every step to ensure her safety, it still wasn't enough. She left behind a daughter who will never again get to see her mother's smile. She left behind a community that admired her strength and resilience. And she left behind a trail of warnings, cries for help that the system failed to acknowledge. No matter how loud she shouted, no matter how many times she spoke up, the system ignored her. And that, in the end, is what cost her life. Her story forces us to ask the hard questions. How many more women have to shout before someone listens? How many more have to suffer in silence, wondering if their lives even matter enough to be protected? Crystal's story is a tragic reminder of how easily someone can slip through the cracks, even when the signs are clear. And for every woman like Crystal, there are countless others out there, still fighting to be heard. Crystal Evans should be here today. She should be planning her future, seeing her daughter grow, and continuing to build the life she had worked so hard for. But instead we're left asking, what happened to her? What happened to the justice she so desperately needed? And how many more will have to go through what she did before we finally take action? Crystal's death should not be the end of her story. It should be a call to action. It should be a reminder that every woman deserves safety. It should be a reminder that the system must do more to protect those who cry out for help. Thank you for watching this episode of City Crime Tales. If Crystal's story moved you, subscribe and share this video so her voice is never forgotten. Share it so others can see the truth, that when we fail to act, we fail the people who need us the most. Together, we can make sure Crystal's death was not in vain. Until next time, stay safe and stay aware. What do you think needs to change in our justice system to protect women like Crystal? How many more stories like hers do we need to hear before things truly change? Let us know in the comments below, and please share this video to help raise awareness.